Drachen Fire is without a doubt one of the most missed roller coasters. Not only that, but it had such a short operating life and such an odd history that it is often talked about even now after its removal. In today's video, we'll look at why Drachen Fire failed and how Arrow had to build a roller coaster off of B&M's blueprints. In around 1990, Busch Gardens approached B&M in search of two roller coasters. Iron Wolf had recently opened at Six Flags Great America, and though it wasn't receiving the best reviews, it was more or less a hit sales-wise. Busch Gardens at this time was pushing the limits of roller coasters. First they had Loch Ness Monster, which broke every record imaginable, and then Big Bad Wolf, which compromised stats for an interesting and unique ride experience. Next, they wanted a big, more modern version of Loch Ness Monster. B&M had the technology, blueprints, area, and plans set in firm place. The conflict was a park management versus the B&M standards. I don't really think that B&M is to blame here. The park sort of pulled out of the contract at the last minute, not really trusting the new technology that B&M had to offer, and this forced B&M into an odd position. This forced them to enforce their shipment deadline, and that project was cancelled. Not in the park size though. They recruited good old trusty Arrow to reuse the blueprints provided by B&M to create what would be known as Drachen Fire. Now, before we get into the actual information about Drachen Fire, let's just ponder what this B&M version would have been. It would have been very similar to Kumba at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay, but it would have followed a layout a little bit more similar to, Drachen Fire, meaning it would have a little bit more of that second half and possibly be even more intense. Now, just really quickly, the reason that B&M's layout was so much better than Drachen Fire's is because B&M's trains are designed to place the center of gravity on the train. Arrow just kind of places its riders where there's room, meaning that they are less able to create large forces on their rides. Anyway, Arrow complied, but the use of these blueprints explains why Drachen Fire had such a zany and unique layout. These blueprints weren't 100% copied though. The original blueprints made by B&M were very similar to Kumba, and they had the left-hand drop and the loop circling around the lift hill and a very nice second half. Arrow did not know how to replicate the loop around the lift hill due to their sparse computer programming, so they altered the layout to have a somewhat inverting drop instead of that loop. Due to their recycling of the layout, this explains why Drachen Fire was the first and only Arrow to utilize an altered support structure and the never-seen-before elements. Now, as for why Drachen Fire closed so early and suffered so many problems, well, it's just because of the layout. Drachen Fire was very much a thrown-together homework assignment by Arrow. The elements would cause great stress to the train's track, and generally it was just not a sustainable coaster. Removing it outweighed the cost of keeping and maintaining it. As a side note, the entrance and exit of the Batwing element caused extreme G-forces on riders, making the ride uncomfortable for very many people. Kumba opened a year later in Busch Gardens Tampa Bay as the B&M equivalent to the Drachen disaster. It's too bad to see a prestigious project like this build up and fall apart so quickly, but it shows that parks can be very indecisive about what they are adding. Thank you so much for watching. I have more canceled roller coaster videos on the way. Be sure to like, comment, and maybe even subscribe. I will catch you all next time.